Welcome. We are honored to have you here today. First, I want to wish Paolo De Mas, who was supposed to be our moderator today, all the best with his health. We hope he will recover soon. I cannot say enough. Thank you to Amar Harwi and Yunus Abulgit of the Hope and Development Foundation. Without them, it would not have been possible to organize this event. Also, many thanks to the Ambassador of Morocco to the Netherlands, the Honorable Mr. Belouki, who was so kind to give us a warm reception at his embassy in The Hague. We'd like to thank Diederik Samsom, KWR Water, University of Applied Sciences in Rotterdam, and Vopak for joining us in an early stage. We also want to emphasize the warm relationship with Brahim Bukhari and his colleagues at the University of Applied Sciences of Rotterdam. Our program has changed a little bit. Unfortunately, Mr. Badaiken was not able to be present this morning due to obligations elsewhere. We are therefore very happy to welcome Mr. Mohamed Ghazali, Secretary General of the Ministry of Energy, Mining and Sustainable Development, as a speaker this morning. We are very honored that you are able to be here with us on such short notice. Mr. Allard Kastelein of Port of Rotterdam has a meeting in his agenda that requires his presence. Therefore, we wholeheartedly welcome Mr. Nico van Doren, Director New Business Development of Port of Rotterdam. Last, but certainly not least, Professor Ad van Wijk and Noé van Hulst. Professor van Wijk is a long-standing champion of the hydrogen economy as professor at the Mechanical, Maritime and Materials Engineering Institute at the Tech University of Delft, and he is also a fellow at KWR Water, an institute that is a forerunner on clean water and sustainable energy. We have been in contact with Mr. van Hulst quite some time. We have known him since his time at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate as Special Hydrogen Envoy. Currently, he is a hydrogen advisor at the International Energy Agency, chair-elect of the IPHE and International Hydrogen Advisor at GasUnie, Dutch for Gas Union. We suggest all speakers share their thoughts with us for about 50 minutes and 5 minutes for questions and answers. Now I want to give the floor to Amar Harwi of the Hope and Development Foundation.
Goedenavond allemaal, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Wij zijn Stichting Hoop en Ontwikkeling in Leiden. Wij zijn eigenlijk gespecialiseerd in thema's organiseren van symposia's en bijeenkomsten. En deze thema heeft ons een beetje geraakt, aangezien dat steeds wereldwijd het gaat heel slecht met het milieu. Toen dachten wij van misschien maken wij gewoon verbinding tussen Oost en West in het thema nieuwe energieën. Dus dat was die aanleiding. Bij deze willen we vanuit Stichting Hoop en Ontwikkeling, omdat ze zijn ook gespecialiseerd in thema radicalisering, willen wij een minuut stilstaan voor de slachtoffers van Nice. Een minuutje ten herdenking van de doden van de slachtoffers van Nice. Ik zou zeggen van harte welkom en wij hopen met deze bijeenkomsten een aanleiding om verder naar goede toekomst, voornamelijk het milieu. Ik zou zeggen van harte welkom, dus bij deze.
Dankjewel, thank you very much. This is a good moment to welcome Mr. Nico van Doren of the Port of Rotterdam. Welcome and thank you very much that you are able to be here with us this morning. We'd love to hear from you your thoughts on the matters of hydrogen in the Port of Rotterdam. Can you share your PowerPoint presentation with us?
Yeah, I think that should work. So let me try.
Yeah.
If it does work, then you should be able to see my slide now. So let me start. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, though I only see one picture of a lady, but then it's lady and gentlemen. It's an honor and privilege as Director of New Business Development of the Port of Rotterdam to participate in this meeting. Under other circumstances, our CEO, Mr. Albert Kastelein, would have been here to present the Rotterdam case, and he would have participated in this discussion. Unfortunately, he's unable to join, but he sends you all the best and wishes us a good meeting. What I would like to do in this short presentation is share with you some insights in the developments around hydrogen in the Port of Rotterdam. And to the best of my knowledge, I believe that these developments could take the relationship between the countries of Morocco and the Netherlands, and then the Netherlands as part of the European Union, to a new level. A level in which I think both sides can take mutual advantage. So we do have good wishes on this developments around hydrogen. Let me start with a short sketch. Now, next slide should come, of the Port of Rotterdam. The Port of Rotterdam can be seen as an engine of the economy, not just the economy of the Netherlands, but the economy of a large part of northwestern Europe. The port provides employment to over 385,000 people, so that's quite a lot of people. And it adds value to the economy, over 45 billion euros each year. Now, these are numbers of last year. But what happened this year due to COVID was that it was affected quite drastically. If you look at cargo throughput, here are the numbers of 2019. What we've seen is in this year that we've had a drop of almost 10% in cargo throughput. Now, this is a general cargo throughput. But if you take a closer look at this cargo throughput, we've also seen that the future of energy transition also shows in cargo throughput. For instance, the coal throughput has dropped much more than 10%, almost 30–40% of drop in cargo throughput for coal. Now, that is one effect already of energy transition, because we've had a sunny and windy year so far. Today it's rainy, but almost the whole part of the year was sunny and windy. So the share of renewable energy was quite higher than it was the years before. And therefore coal throughput went down. So already today we see a lot of effects of energy transition. So these are the numbers of today, but how did we get here? How did we get to becoming this engine of the economy? This map shows you the development as port that we've went through in the last centuries. And I won't go into detail in all steps that we've been going through, but one issue, one element is key in these developments, and that is that we've always had a good competency in forward planning. So if you look, for instance, and I hope you can see my cursor on the screen, if you look, for instance, in the periods that we've had just before and after the Second World War, you could have seen that in these areas the developments around fossil feedstocks took off. Here are the large refineries in the Rotterdam area, and they were developed well before already the Second World War. So well before fossil fuel really took off in the economy. Then in the late 50s and early 60s, the developments around petrochemical industry took off. So once again, at the start of the wave of developments in petrochemical industry, Rotterdam started with developing its industrial area in the port. If you then go to the 60s and 70s, we see this large share in the port, and that was an area in the port where there was much more focus on import of energy streams. So the energy coming from the North Sea Basin, oil coming from the North Sea Basin, coal coming originally from in Germany and in the Netherlands went down, and Europe became more reliable on import of fossil fuel, fossil energy streams for all over the world. So the port anticipated in developing quite early a large area for import of all these energy streams. We then move on to the 70s until now. We've seen globalization in cargo streams taking place. So we had a focus on containers, and that's much more in the newest land reclamation. Now we are at the moment in a junction in time where we see that we are moving away from fossil feedstock to new feedstocks. So what we did was 5-6 years ago draw a large strategy on how to deal with energy transition and feedstock transition. And once again, I won't go into detail of all parts of this comprehensive strategy, but one element I would like to take out for the discussion of today, and that's the element of hydrogen. Hydrogen is a very important part of the energy transition as we see it for Rotterdam. So what we did was draw a strategy around hydrogen, and this strategy is summarized in this infographic. If I start really small in the port, then one of the elements that we're working on today is the development of a hydrogen backbone. This is a pipeline running all the way through the port. It's this white pipeline, and it is supposed to connect supply and demand in the port. Demand, what we think will come from hydrogen as a transport fuel, so for running trucks and driving inland barges and barges. But really important also is the supply that we see and the demand that we see coming from Germany and other industrial parts in the Netherlands and in Belgium. So there needs to be a good connection with the German hinterland. Now, where does this hydrogen come from? This hydrogen could be made quite close because we are developing offshore wind in the North Sea, and we believe that this offshore wind, which generates electricity, could be used to create green hydrogen. We also have developments around blue hydrogen. So coming from refinery gases, the carbon can be taken out, and then you get clean hydrogen which you can use. So we see a lot of developments in and around the port on hydrogen. But is that enough? No, that's not enough. What we see is that the amount of electricity that can be produced in the North Sea area by means of offshore wind, onshore by solar and onshore wind, won't be enough to really fulfill the demands that are in the Netherlands and in the rest of Europe, and especially also in Germany. So one point, we started to have a look at how do you create new supply chains for hydrogen? Where does import of hydrogen come into play? And this is where we are in contact with Morocco. So I see Hans de Willig also in the meeting from Vopak. There are people from Maassen, I think, from Iersen in the call. And we have a cooperation in place with Morocco to investigate the possibilities of setting up a supply chain for hydrogen coming from Morocco. And we have other cooperations with other countries around the world to investigate these new supply chains. So that is the importance of import. So this summarizes more or less our full hydrogen vision, but this is for the port. But if you take one step further, it's not just that we need it in the Netherlands. No, today the Port of Rotterdam is the energy hub for Northwestern Europe. And we believe that also in the future, Rotterdam can still play this role. So the importance is not just for Rotterdam, but it's as important for Germany and other countries around the Netherlands to develop a good grid for hydrogen and to also develop supply chains for hydrogen from all over the world. Maybe I should say, because you see in this graph, you see it starting with a little bit of gray in 2020. That's already existing today. And this gray hydrogen, Rotterdam is one of the biggest ports, industry areas about gray hydrogen. But this gives you an idea on how big the potential is to go into imported hydrogen. it's really huge. Now I told you that it's not just hydrogen for Rotterdam. No, we need good connections with the other economies around the Netherlands. So what you see here is that we really working on a development of full supply chains coming from overseas, from countries like Morocco, coming to Rotterdam, and then all the way into the industrial areas in the Netherlands, connecting also the industrial areas in Germany. Now, the interesting part, I think, is about the cooperation that we see between the Netherlands and Morocco, is that Morocco, I heard an interview with Mr. Iken around the developments on hydrogen in Morocco. There is so much potential in the development of hydrogen in Morocco that you could really build an industry in Morocco on this renewable energy. But you also could play a role in exporting these renewable energy sources to other parts of the world. And I think that's one of the key elements also about renewable energy, whereas coal and oil were really concentrated on places around the world. These new sources of renewable energy, they are more spread around the world. So what we believe and hope is that this also means that prosperity will also be much more spread around the world and not so much focused in just one or two areas around the globe. So our belief is that we have a good vision on hydrogen, both in Morocco and in the Netherlands, and we see good possibilities to connect our visions and to really fill them with projects that we can develop together. So with that statement, I would like to come to a close and like to thank you for your attention and give the floor back to Mr. Marcus Roelofs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. That's
Paul, you're on mute.
Kan de presentatie worden gedeeld, Nico? Het ziet er erg interessant uit.
Sure, that's no problem to share the slides.
Oké. Misschien nog eentje dan. Welke bedrijven in Rotterdam zijn nu feitelijk bezig met grootschalige waterstofimport? Vopak kennen het wel, maar wie nog meer?
I'll translate it. Yeah, the question is which companies are currently developing projects around hydrogen in the port of Rotterdam. That's a large list already. If you look at, for instance, Vopak is involved, but also we do have projects with Shell, with BP, with Air Liquide, with a number of companies that are developing transport means, so VDL, well, different companies all around the supply chains in hydrogen. I already mentioned the connection with Morocco, where we work closely with Masen. So there are a real large number of companies involved in projects around hydrogen. What also might be interesting to say that it's not only really future and far future. The projects we have in place now, I indicated the hydrogen backbone. We are planning to have this hydrogen backbone in operation in 2024. And why do we want to have it in operation in 2024? That is because the large electrolysis projects of Shell on the Maasvlakte will also come in operation in 2024. For these kind of projects, the size of these projects, that's really fast. So it's happening today.
Thank you. Nee, niet. Nee, ik heb geen vragen meer. Ja.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation. Very actually impressive. More than 600 development of the port of Rotterdam. More than 385,000 employees. More than 45 billion revenues on a yearly basis. These are all very impressive numbers. And I could imagine that there is a lot of know-how, expertise that others can also learn from. You mentioned the collaboration with Morocco, especially on renewable energy, hydrogen to be specific. And I'm very curious if there are other ongoing collaborations in other domains or related expertise. Because I do strongly believe that with such bilateral collaboration, there will be always opportunities to learn from each other, and to learn from fields and experiences that Rotterdam has, at least in this case, when it comes to the harbor of Rotterdam.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. At the heart of our strategy around energy transition, but also at the heart of other strategies that we have as port on digitization, there is cooperation. We believe that developing these kind of projects can only come from working together. And in this cooperation, sharing of knowledge is key. So what we really like to set up, and we do that in all kinds of projects, is to set up a knowledge-to-knowledge cooperation, a business-to-business cooperation, and a public cooperation. So in this we can share our knowledge, and that sharing can be both ways, because I'm really impressed with also the knowledge that we see in Morocco around renewable energy. So I think that combining the knowledge on both sides can give us both advantage.
Nog één vraag. De pijplijn die ik zag op het plaatje, is dat een nieuwe pijplijn of ligt die al in de grond? Wordt het een ombouwpijplijn?
The question is around the infrastructure in the port, whether it's new or whether it's existing. The pipeline I showed you will be a new pipeline infrastructure, which we are designing now and planning to build in the next few years.
Yeah, the pipeline to Germany.
The pipeline in the port and the pipeline to Germany, both.
Also new.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I can. What we see in the Netherlands is that we have a well-developed system for gas, and this means that we have a system that is for large parts of the Netherlands is a double system. So this gives us an advantage in moving from methane to, for instance, hydrogen, by using this double system and putting one part of the system in place for hydrogen. Together with Gasunie, and this is more Gasunie than we, there is an infrastructure plan for the Netherlands developed, and that is what you are referring to, is a large national grid for hydrogen. And the graphs I've shown you are additions to this national grid that Gasunie is planning to develop. The double, I mean that the backbones for methane in the Netherlands are double, so there are really two pipes close together. Yeah, but I think that we have a guest in our panel that can tell you much more about that, and I see him in the middle of my screen. That's Ad van Wijk. He will come to that later, I guess. I think that if you look, and it was already a bit in my presentation, if you look at the possibilities we see in the Netherlands and the countries around the North Sea Basin to develop renewable energy, there is a maximum in developing renewable energy from the North Sea Basin. So that's why we think we should connect with other areas where there's abundance of solar and wind and geothermal energy. And I heard some numbers around the possibilities in Morocco for solar power and wind power. If you hear these numbers, they are beyond imagination. So I think there is enough possibility for renewable energy around the world. Yeah, I guess so. I see one hand of RJ.
Yeah. This is Jeroen Rodenburg. You hear me? Good morning to all. You and the other participants might have wondered who is this JR? Okay, well, I'll be very brief because I'm in the listening mode still. I arrived last night. I'm just very happy to join in and to listen in especially. And I just wanted to present myself, to introduce myself. I'm the new ambassador to Morocco, the Dutch ambassador, very keen on contributing to this very important collaboration in renewable energy, hydrogen, and you can count on us. Luc is here as well, of course, but you can count on me as well. I've always been very active also in this field. The last 4 years I was ambassador to Colombia, but looking forward to work with all of you.
Thank you.
Dear Mr. Rodenburg, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Morocco. It's very nice to have you here today with us. We're very honored. Thanks for your insight and your offer to cooperate with us in the relationship, the economic relationship regarding energy between the Netherlands and Morocco. Thank you very much. We hope you stay with us this morning. Really interesting to hear and see what developments are taking place in the Port of Rotterdam regarding sustainable energy, especially the opportunity of importing green produced hydrogen and exporting that all across Europe, which can be the main successor of many fossil fuels we now use and import via the main gate of Rotterdam. So, thanks again. I hope you stay with us, Mr. Nico van Doorn. Next in line is, everybody knows him, of course, Mr. Diederik Samsom, Head of the Cabinet of the Vice President of the European Commission. Mr. Samsom will tell us about the European hydrogen economy, what plans the European Commission has in place to enforce a rapid transition into sustainable energy sources and carriers. Obviously, hydrogen is an energy carrier, but a big one. And yeah, we are very interested to hear from Mr. Samsom what the plans are of the European Commission. I would like to welcome you. Thank you.
Hello, good morning to all of you. Thank you. Well, I was asked to give you a brief overview of the Green Deal and its relevance to hydrogen developments in and around Europe. I will be brief because I would like to have as much time for questions and answers as possible. But first of all, let me give you the context of the Green Deal. And in order to do that, I need to take you back to another era, which is the pre-COVID era, which is actually only 10 months ago, when we presented the Green Deal in December last year as the first deliverable of the von der Leyen Commission. And the Green Deal stood out from, let's say, normal environmental policies, like we've seen dozens in the last decade, for several reasons. And I mentioned two because they are relevant for the rest of the conversation. The first way the Green Deal stood out from normal environmental policy was because of its ambition. For one, the lowest common denominator. For once, politicians decided to go for the environmental integrity, the necessity of meeting our objectives, which is actually only one, is preserve our ecosystems for future generations. Hence the climate neutrality goal for 2050, but also the zero pollution ambition and the ambition to stop the loss of biodiversity. The sixth mass extinction, which when you compare apples to pears, is maybe just the same or even a bigger threat to humanity than climate change. So the ambition was one of the ways the Green Deal stood out from, well, the conventional environmental policies. And the other big difference was that we actually didn't present it as an environmental strategy. No, we presented it as the European growth strategy, providing new momentum, new impulse, new growth to this aging continent, aging in many ways. And I remember receiving some flack for that, especially from my old buddies in the environmental movement, because how on earth can you present an environmental strategy as a growth plan? The two are conflicting, aren't they? Well, they are not, provided that you do it right. Those two pillars of the Green Deal, its ambition and its growth part, sort of set the, let's say, political mentality, the mindset of politicians working on from the Green Deal. And that was relevant because in March this year, our world was turned upside down by the entrance of the pandemic. COVID-19 entered our world and completely changed it. And I must admit that for a moment I despaired a little because we've seen that before. Only 12 years ago, a former vice president, presidential hopeful from the United States, Al Gore, walked into Europe with a movie on his back, An Inconvenient Truth. And he mesmerized the European audience and the European politicians. And at that time, I remember op-eds in the Financial Times by Tony Blair and Jan-Peter Balkenende urging their fellow European leaders to step up to the plate and come up with an ambitious climate strategy. And those plans were made. They were put on paper. And then Lehman Brothers fell. And we entered the world of the financial crisis, and we haven't heard a lot anymore about An Inconvenient Truth. Only a few people know that there was a sequel made. So that's what normally happens with humanity. You set yourself an ambitious dot on the horizon far away, and that gets wiped out by an immediate urgency that requires all our attention. So there we are, we're in March, and I feared histoire would répète. The history would repeat itself. But it didn't happen. I think it didn't happen because of that mindset that we set ourselves in December. This was our last and only chance to make it right for future generations. And this was our growth strategy. And we all know whatever happens in the next few months or even a year with the COVID-19 strategy, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we will need to recover from it economically, socially, mentally, maybe even. And we need a growth strategy. So the Green Deal was not put in the shelf to deal with an urgent matter. No, the Green Deal was put front and center of our response to COVID-19. We didn't diminish on our ambitious targets. We didn't put them away for a while. No, we put them on steroids, doubling down on the target, doubling down on our effort. And that's relevant, especially for things like hydrogen, because yes, hydrogen was already in the Green Deal plan. It was mentioned in December, and there was a commitment made to develop a strategy for hydrogen in the future. COVID-19 made that much more prominent, much more urgent, and much bigger. So Europe now embarks on a, you could say, crazy journey to develop 6 gigawatt of electrolyzer capacity by 2024 and 2 times 40 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity for green hydrogen by 2030. 2 times 40, one in Europe and one around Europe, which is both to the east and to the south. And there's now also a little part to the west around Europe, which is called the UK, but still, well, that's a, let's say, a transitional phase. So we concentrate on the east and also on the south for the second 40 gigawatt. And we are going to develop a framework to make that happen. 6 gigawatt, putting that on paper, is more than just a hollow phrase. It is our real commitment, and we have the policy and the money for it. Because with COVID-19 and with the necessity to create a recovery strategy, we developed Next Generation EU, our recovery package for the coming years. 750 billion euros provided to member states in order to develop recovery plans and to embark on a journey towards a better future. Build Back Better, it's a slogan from the other side of the Atlantic Ocean from one of the presidential candidates at the moment, but we could adapt it too, because it's also our motto and our slogan now. And Recover EU, or Next Generation EU, is relevant in the coming years. So it's also relevant to develop the 6 gigawatt in electrolyzer capacity in the coming years. And what we expect to happen is the following. We have now set out guidelines and regulation, as we always do here in this Berlaymont building in Brussels, in order to make the member states, to incentivize the member states to make the right plans. And if you've read the Next Generation EU communication and the regulation around it, you've seen that one of the important flagship projects that we identified in order to recover from the pandemic is hydrogen. It's hydrogen itself. The problem that we have is that Europe is not able to spend, Brussels is not going to spend that 750 billion. We have to hand it over to member states, and they will spend it in order to recover. That's how a confederation, we're not a federation of states, but how a confederation of states usually works, and this time too. What we try to do is meld those 27 different recovery plans into one project. And take the example of hydrogen. What we try to do is get 27 recovery plans, take the chapter for hydrogen out of those 27 plans, and those 27 chapters should be one project, one big 40 gigawatt project for hydrogen. And here's my little problem for the Netherlands, because obviously people listening into this conversation think, well, the Netherlands will be a prominent part in that one European hydrogen plan, won't we? Well, maybe, but the Netherlands are at the moment not really coming forward with anything that looks like a recovery plan. Actually, the Dutch government already announced that they will wait with delivering such a plan to after the elections and after the forming of a new coalition, which is somewhere in the summer of 2021. And you can imagine that a plan will only arrive in Brussels then at the beginning of 2022. And that's much too late. So my plea to the people in this conference is, if you have any influence somewhere in Den Haag, or indirectly or directly, please urge the Dutch government to join in this journey, because France is doing it, Germany is doing it, Portugal is doing it, Spain, Italy, Austria, Slovakia, Czechia, and they all have that chapter on hydrogen. And we are just on the receiving end of it. And we're gonna mold them together into one hydrogen project. And it would be a pity if the Netherlands are out of there. And now fast forward to the south, Morocco, because that's the other 40 gigawatt. And Next Generation EU is a pretty selfish project aimed at European, the continent. But obviously the original hydrogen strategy wasn't that selfish, and we are committed to work together with what we call the Southern Neighborhood, of which Morocco is a pretty important part. We will cooperate with them, and the main initiative in which we will do that is the so-called Africa-Europe Green Energy Initiative. It was published also this year in March, and that provides ourselves with a framework and opportunity to work together with countries in the Southern Neighborhood, and again, Morocco is one of the most prominent ones, to develop that second 40 gigawatt in order to connect it to our hydrogen project, to our hydrogen network in Europe. So what I hope will happen in the coming month is plans will drop in our mailbox in the Berlaymont building in Brussels. We will assess those plans. In the context of Next Generation EU, we will disperse the money and investments will be made. First of all, towards 2024, 6 gigawatt in total, and then towards 2030, 40 gigawatts in total, and that's just the beginning. Because after that, and we've shown that in our impact assessment, after 2030, hydrogen will really go on a fly towards renewing our energy system. I leave it at that, and I'm available for all your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samsom. This is a very inspiring story. It's very interesting to hear from you the point of view from the European Commission regarding the use and the generation and the storage of sustainable energy. It's very good to hear that the European Commission has money to invest. I couldn't agree more with you on the subjects that you covered, and I would be more than happy to share your point of view here in the Netherlands, like you asked. So don't worry about that. We'll do that. Now we have time for questions. I hope you stay with us during this morning.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Diederik Samsom, for the inspiring talk, putting things forward for new generations. Let me pick up, there is many things that are very nice and interesting and debatable, but let me pick up one question which actually triggered me a little bit. You mentioned that there are recovery plans set up by different countries, but when it comes to the Netherlands, at least if I correctly understood you, there is no recovery plan, there is no chapter about hydrogen, and they are, according to what I understood, they are promising to do that after the election. Well, this statement triggered me a little bit. So there are two parts. First part, what could be the reasons behind this? Because as far as I know, Dutch people are very pragmatic, are very smart in getting things done on time and sometimes ahead of time. So I would be very surprised if all these countries around the world, around Europe, are already part of the game, and the Dutch government is still behind. So is that a political statement, or otherwise, what's the philosophy, what the reason behind it? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, interesting question. Well, first of all, it's not a disaster in itself, because obviously one of the reasons that the Netherlands is not in a hurry is that the Netherlands has a huge fiscal capacity, as we call it. So the Netherlands is rich. So obviously, without us handing over money to the Netherlands, I think plans for hydrogen will be made and will be paid for. I was just pointing at the fact that there is 5.6 billion euros allocated for the Netherlands in grants, so free money. Well, you paid for it. But the 5.6 billion, I wouldn't leave it in Brussels. I would take it as soon as I could. I can only speculate about the reasons not to do it. Obviously, the Netherlands was not a real proponent of this idea of a recovery plan, and then that means that the Netherlands might, well, think that they shouldn't be first in line to get the money that they didn't want to that they didn't want to develop in the first place. Elections are always a good reason to stall some developments. That's the price of democracy. And maybe there's also one other point, is that the Netherlands was pretty vocal on the need for reforms, not just investments in all kinds of nice pet projects, but also reforms to strengthen your economy. And those reforms are prescribed by the European Union in our semester, as we call it, all those different words, but actually it's an analysis of all countries and the weaknesses in their economy. And you can imagine that in Italy, it's the labor market and the pensions, etc. In the Netherlands, it's the aggressive tax planning, as it's called. It's the ability that the Netherlands provides to multinationals to do not pay taxes. And that's one of the issues that should be reformed. And I guess maybe the Netherlands are a little, they need the elections to make a step forward in that. But as I said before, nothing is definite. This is just the first rumors that we got, and maybe there's ways from, let's say, Rotterdam Port or other stakeholders in the Netherlands to change the speed at which such a plan is made. Again, it's quite a lot of money. Hydrogen is a prominent part of that in a flagship. Other countries are doing it too. That's, I guess, 3 very good reasons not to wait any longer.
Thank you.
Thanks for answering this really interesting question. Good to know that the hydrogen economy is really about economy and about our sustainable future. It's not about cost, but more about investing, which is a good thing, of course. And good to hear that we need science for that. It's going to deliver high end jobs, a lot of jobs. So it's really investing in our ecology and economy. Good to know. We have a next question from Hans de Willigen of Vopak. Vopak is, of course, a very well-known company in the harbor of Rotterdam in bulk goods. Vopak is also really onto the next step, the next big thing, the hydrogen economy. Hans de Willigen.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah, I have a question to Mr. Samson, if I may. What we see at the moment is we are working towards many initiatives to import green hydrogen into Rotterdam, as Nico also indicated. One of the things that we notice at the market and potential end customers at the moment is that there is more clarity on the CO2 and ETS system in order to make a judgment on pricing of green hydrogen. So could you say something about the outlook on that topic, when clarity could be given? That's one question. And the other question is that we also notice that most of the subsidy instruments which are currently in place, either on a regional, national or EU level, are particularly focused on those who are emitting CO2 at present and who could avoid CO2 emissions going forward. But not so much instruments that could help infrastructure companies like Vopak is to enable the market to enter with green hydrogen imports. So there's more subsidy instruments available for those who emit today than that there is clarity on those who are paving the way for large-scale imports like infrastructure companies. And is there a thought also on that topic that may change? Thank you.
Yes, thanks for those questions. First of all, indeed, the ETS is going to change pretty dramatically, and we are going to put the legislative proposal for that on the table in June 2021, together with all the other legislation that is needed to get ourselves to a -55 CO2 reduction target in 2030. And the package is also therefore titled the Fit for 55 package. With about 13 proposals in there. One of them, and I think one of the most prominent of them, is the revision of the ETS. I cannot preempt what will be in there exactly, but we already outlined some of the ideas in the communication on the target that we produced in September, and for hydrogen, you could envisage that the free allocation that we now give to hydrogen producers working with steam reformers, so using natural gas and emitting quite a lot of CO2, and the free allocation actually means that they don't have to pay for the CO2 emissions. That will, I'm not sure whether it will disappear, but it will get smaller at least. So hydrogen production using natural gas emitting CO2 will get a price. And that has an influence on the market, because it will also have basically, well, decide the competitiveness that you might import or even produce in Europe without emitting CO2. Secondly, on investments, we have a multiple, well, it's a whole catalog on subsidies that you have to know by heart in order to get your way through it. But one of them I want to mention, which is the Innovation Fund, which is now actually, the first call was just closed, I think yesterday, and I got it was 1 billion euros for real innovation. The call received applications for 31 billion, so it's a 31 times oversubscription, which is a luxury, but also tells you where we are at the moment, actually. And a lot of them, more than 50 projects on hydrogen, were applying for that money. And that's obviously about innovative technologies, electrolyzer technology, maybe also others, maybe also storage and transport, because innovation there is needed too. What we actually hope to do with the investment subsidies that we have in place, not only from the Innovation Fund, but later on also maybe from other parts of European money, but also national money, is to have the transport infrastructure paid by them. Transport and maybe also storage. After that, what we need to do is obviously also to develop operational costs, or to subsidies for operational costs, which will mainly go to either the electrolyzer or the producer of the green electricity for the electrolyzer. I'm sorry, I can't be more specific at the moment, especially not on numbers, etc. And that's what you're really interested in. But I'll keep an eye on the market in the next 6 months at least, and then after that, we are at least committed, whatever the number is that is needed for that, we are committed to make green hydrogen a competitive part of the hydrogen mix.
Thank you. So sorry, if I may, Marcus, one reaction to what Mr. Samson was saying. I think the key element in what we see in this point in time is that the infrastructure may not have an innovative character per se as, let's say, a large scale upscaling on the electrolyzer side per se, but it is a prerequisite basically for large scale imports that we need to make this transition happen.
Yeah.
So, and the Innovation Fund is really focusing on the innovative part, R&D side, whereas our nature of the business, and I think many others in this call, is more so to facilitate through infrastructure the potential imports, for which the funding is maybe not as clear as for those who are currently producing or using the material. I just want to give it to you as a sort of a consideration maybe going forward to take that also into account.
Yeah, no, that's true. And exactly that's what I also stressed in the part of my talk on the recovery plans from national member states. Because what I see happening is that France and Germany and also Portugal are using the money to break the chicken and egg. Partly the way to break a chicken and egg is always, well, there's no one way to break that dilemma, but a possible way in the hydrogen economy is obviously making infrastructure available. And literally go for bridges to nowhere in terms of pipes to nowhere in order to create something at one end of the pipe and on the other end of the pipe, obviously. And what I see happening now is staying pretty optimistic as far as we can see it from the European side of things. But I hope the Netherlands is not going to miss out on that because we really see things, the traditional Franco-German axis is pretty active here. And they are working on those plans. And Austria, together with their neighbor, well, it's not their direct neighbor, but they have huge plans with Ukraine, developing pretty cheap wind power and therefore also powering their electrolyzers and developing green hydrogen. So you see from the east, the Italians are very active. That is also good news for Morocco, but also for Tunisia, maybe Algeria in between. And obviously Portugal, and that's where Netherlands come in. So if it's European money or not, but please be aware of what's happening in the European context and hook yourself up to it.
Now I see Mr. Nico van Doren of Port of Rotterdam has a question or a remark for Mr. Diederik Samsom.
Yeah, that's correct. It's not so much a question, but maybe I'd like to offer to Diederik that we have in development some projects around electrolyzers. I think you're aware of the projects we have in development. We do have the plans now to have an electrolyzers park for 2 gigawatt in operation. Well, the first tranche is in 2024. And what we also did is create our own recovery plan as Port of Rotterdam. We call it Starter Engine, and we dropped our recovery plan in The Hague. So I think from our side we are working on stressing the fact that the Netherlands needs to also put up their chapter to the recovery plans in Brussels. But what I also would like to stress is the fact that you really mentioned the connection, and that's the topic also of today, of connecting from Europe to the countries around, to the east and the south of Europe. And I think that's a really good signal to hear that again. And I'd like to take that out of your remarks also and give that back to the people from Morocco. That's really hopeful, I think, for the future developments.
Now we have a question from Willem Hazenberg of Stork Asset Management Technology. Willem Hazenberg is one of our other champions in the Netherlands in the field of hydrogen. Willem, please give us your question.
Yeah, my question was, Diederik, there was a request. You hear me?
Yeah.
There was a request on the from the Dutch government about the SE++, and that was blocked by Brussels. And a lot of people now say, okay, Brussels not supporting the European of the Dutch hydrogen plants, or they block it. Also, it delayed again. And then, also, that's a little bit a different message, but still it delayed current projects. How do you see?
Yeah, well, first of all, we didn't block anything. there was an exchange of thoughts between services, which is very common. So the Ministry of Economic Affairs might have given a phone call to DG Comp, which is DG Competition here in our Brussels, which is the guardian of the internal market, and indeed the gatekeeper for state aid in order to preserve the internal market. And I can imagine that DG Comp has given a general warning that giving state aid for polluting activities is not going to fly. For clean activities, though, it's a very common tool, and it's actually encouraged to do that. And there's everything in between. What we are trying to develop right now is a categorization for hydrogen. So and I think the carbon footprint of hydrogen will be the new currency in terms of the eligibility for subsidies. Starting off with, let's say, the conventional hydrogen, steam reformed from natural gas, that will not receive any subsidies, period. And going all the way to the other side of the spectrum, which is making hydrogen with an electrolyzer from purely green electricity, which is eligible for subsidies. First of all, the green electricity is eligible for subsidies. That's already taken care of. And then obviously transferring that electricity into hydrogen might also have an added cost. So some subsidies might be available for that. We are looking at contracts for difference as the tool for that. You can imagine that an electrolyzer in the first years might use partly green and partly gray electricity, which creates a carbon footprint that is sort of halfway between the two extremes. And there, your subsidy might be halfway between the two extremes. So I think there is not that black and white situation. There is a nuanced spectrum, because you can also envisage that steam reformers might have a future if they combine it with CO2 sequestration. And there you also have maybe subsidies available for that. There's quite a big discussion going on, well, not only in the European Union Commission, but also in within all stakeholders. What's actually the best subsidy scheme, the framework in which we should put those subsidies on the table. And as I said, the consensus is that the carbon footprint is the new currency for that.
I think also important is to look to the different regions. I mean, look at the national scale, we don't have a lot of renewable energy. When you look at regional scale, there is a big difference. Let's say to North Netherlands, compare, let's say, to Rotterdam area, what's there and what they can transport or not can transport. I think that should be, and also some parks are directly connected to their own solar or own wind fields. Also, that's also different than just take it from the grid. Also, when you make a joint, also we like a combination of kind of energy productions, conversion, and maybe even an end user as a kind of package.
Yeah,
you have a really value chain. That should be the most nice way.
No, it's true. There's all kinds of setups possible. Obviously, we tried for now the last 20 years to develop a liquid green market for electricity, so it doesn't matter where you are connected. It's one copper plate, and you can buy green electricity, well, up to your liking. But still, indeed, there is advantages for direct connection, also in terms of grid stability, etc. And we have to take that into account. It's a complicated, well, you know better than I do. It's a pretty complicated business to design the right types of subsidies for this. But as I said, we are committed to make green hydrogen a competitive commodity in the hydrogen market and actually in the gas market as a whole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diederik Samsom. On behalf of the European Commission, thank you very much for giving insights in the plans of the European Union and answering the questions of the people here this morning with us. It's very nice to know that from all angles the hydrogen economy is being kickstarted. As you say, it's the chicken and egg. You have to break that problem. We all know that, and it's very good to know that the European Commission is committed to that. Now I would like to introduce to you Mr. Mohamed Ghazali. He is the Secretary General of the Ministry of Energy, Mining and Sustainable Development. We're very happy that on such a short notice he is able to be here with us and give us an insight in the developments in Morocco, and how we can proceed in cooperating on the matters of hydrogen. We see from all sides coming together our interests, which is mutually beneficial, well, that would be very interesting. Mr. Ghazali, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cornelius. I am very happy to be here with you to discuss about hydrogen and sustainable activities about these new old technologies. I take this opportunity also to thank the organizer for their invitation to take part in this very important meeting. This crisis which we are facing today offers opportunity to be seized. Thus, the development of green hydrogen within the framework of the Green Deal for example, can play an important role in the context of economic recovery, in particularly for the energy sector in general, and for the industrial sector particularly, which we want to be sustainable today. I'm very happy to hear Mr. Samson to say that hydrogen or the Green Deal is the response of for this pandemic. It's a very important point that we can also develop and make big more and more. The Green Deal is a common opportunity for Africa and for Europe to successfully transition to low carbon economics and energy systems, for establish an economy model of win-win cooperation between Morocco and UAE, which could serve as a model for other countries of the African continent, ensuring the prosperity of both sides of Mediterranean. Green hydrogen, promising technology. He's promising technology to decarbonize the global economy. Several studies have carried out and confirmed the social or socio-economic and environmental benefits of green hydrogen. Today, three essential factors have changed the situation and are in favor of development of this clean energy vector. First one, shared determination for the decarbonization of our economies. The second is the fall in the costs of renewable electricity. The third is downward trend in the cost of using hydrogen. Green hydrogen now has all the advantages for large-scale development, industrial processes, sustainable mobility, storage of electrical energies, synthetic fuels, etc. The volumes of green molecule necessary to decarbonize our industry and our transport are considerable, thousands of terawatt-hours. This poses a real challenge in scaling up the technology, in particular the electrolyzers component, which in 10 years' time, we will be upgrading to the gigawatt scale. For Morocco, it should be noted that it's a part of the international dynamic aimed at creating an economy and industrial sector around green molecules, hydrogen, ammonia, and particulate. Green hydrogen allows Morocco to decarbonize its industrial sector, in particular the phosphate fertilizer industry, for which it imports today around 2 million tons per year of ammonia. The use of green hydrogen could also benefit our food industry, cement, metallurgy, but also the new future business sector that Morocco is developing, notably with its European partners as part of its industrial acceleration plan. In addition, in the medium of long term, Power-to-X will make it possible to decarbonize our transport sector, land and maritime logistics, and aeronautics industry through the two green hydrogen and methanol components. Thus, an export opportunity in the short to medium term to European countries like Germany of value hydrogen, ammonia, and methanol would make it possible to create Morocco an industrial ecosystem, renewable energies, desalination, electrolysis, and chemical transformation, creating value and direct jobs. Morocco has made a decision to seek alliances and participate in continental projects with friendly countries, including the development of cooperation with Germany, for example. This has just materialized by the signing in June 2020 of an important agreement with the Germany aimed at developing green hydrogen production and setting up research and investment projects on the use of these ecological energy sources. In the same perspective of international cooperation, other partnerships, in particular with the United Kingdom, are being negotiated. Real Morocco and European Union partnership opportunities for green hydrogen is desirable to implement projects on an industrial scale in the green hydrogen and ammonia sector in Morocco through the partnership and joint ventures between private Morocco and European institutions, supported through appropriate funding and technology transfer for local integration of this technology, we hope. Green hydrogen is a technological solution in which it's important to invest today. Morocco has taken his decision, and he decided and convinced that the hydrogen technology is the future, and after the renewable energies plan and position in international and regional area, Morocco aimed to have the same position in hydrogen market, because he has many potential points to develop, build, and boost this technology in his country. So we need to initiate rapid actions, associating public authorities and industrial and partners in Europe and the other countries actors. Now Morocco is finished to set up his roadmap for hydrogen, and he wants to start a new area and new adventure with hydrogen technology. Morocco is widely qualified to be an important player in this world market for green hydrogen. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Ghazali, Secretary General of the Ministry of Energy, Mining and Sustainable Development of Morocco. Thank you very much. I now give the word to my friend and colleague Ammar Harwi of the Hope and Development Foundation.
أولا نرحب بالسيد محمد الغزالي جد الترحيب بهذا اللقاء المبارك فألف مرحبا. We thank محمد الغزالي for his insight. نشكرك سي محمد الغزالي.
شكرا لك. شكرا.
مرحبا.
شكرا لك. أنسا.
Now I see we have a question from Mr. Luc Schillings, Head of Economic Affairs at the Embassy of the Netherlands in Morocco.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ghazali, also for your participation in this conference. I think it's very important for us to hear the Moroccan voice, and also especially because you do it during your holiday, I believe, and also I hope I wish you all the best also with that. My question was about the form of the cooperation you think. You mentioned all the cooperation you have with Germany, and this conference is about the cooperation between the Netherlands and Morocco, and I believe there's already some steps were taken by the Port of Rotterdam and Vopak, and our Mr. Van Doorn also elaborated on that. Do you see other possibilities of cooperation? Thank you very much.
Yes, of course. As you know, there is a strategy for Morocco to have more and more cooperation with the other countries, because to have one type of cooperation is not very profitable for and benefit for Morocco. We can build one project, but if you have more and more technologies, more and more experiences and support, you should have more and more cooperation. So now we have signed our agreements with Germany to have two projects, one for storage electricity with Mazen, and the second is to have a experimental platform with Artisan Institute. But now we discuss also with Portugal to have another cooperation in this way. So it's free, it's open to have another initiatives with the other countries. And I can inform you that the first project perhaps will be start in 2024, because we have signed with a private industrial to build the first private projects for to produce hydrogen in Morocco 15 days before.
Good to hear that from all sides we are more than willing to work together in these matters. It's very good to know for all of us that Morocco is so committed to the hydrogen economy. We all know that King Mohammed VI of Morocco lately publicly stated that Morocco is really committed to hydrogen. So that's really nice to know. Now I'd like to give a word to Mrs. Monica Swanson. She's Business Manager, International Smart Port Transitions at Port of Rotterdam. Mrs. Swanson, for you the word.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Ghazali, for your explanation of the Moroccan position on hydrogen. I don't really have a question. I have a remark or maybe something to contribute. I hear the mention of Germany. I hear the mention of Portugal. My job at Port of Rotterdam is to look at the global corridors for hydrogen, to bring the hydrogen to Rotterdam. I'm one of a team. I can only emphasize that one of the locations we look at with the highest priority for this type of thing is Morocco. There has been talk of subsidies earlier. We will surely need some startup subsidies, and I'm also confident that these will be allocated for this purpose. But what I would really like to say is that I think the potential of Morocco for hydrogen, with the cost of electricity, the renewable electricity they have already managed to produce in such quantities, really impresses us, and we look forward very much to exploring opportunities there. So just from the Port of Rotterdam, I wanted to say this as a part of a team that looks at this type of thing. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to say this, Mr. Roelofs.
You're welcome, Mrs. Swanson. Thank you. I see our ambassador of the Netherlands to Morocco has a remark for us, Mr. Rodenburg.
Thank you so much. Not so much a question. I just wanted to introduce myself also to Mr. Ghazali. Mr. Ghazali, thank you so much for being with us on this important day. This is my first day in your beautiful country. I want to add my voice to my colleagues. Luc, we have heard already so many voices underlying the importance of hydrogen and especially the relationship between our two countries. And I can just assure you that I will do my utmost to make sure that the connections between the Netherlands, Rotterdam especially, and Morocco become even stronger on this important topic. You have underlined the importance of hydrogen also for Morocco, and I hope we can meet soon with you, possibly the minister, to be as complete as possible in this relationship. But you can count on me. Thank you so much, Mr. Ghazali.
Can I have one word, please? Excuse me. Thank you for your disponibility, and thank you for the projects between Port of Rotterdam and Morocco. We look to finish all the discussion about these projects, and we look forward to really have export for hydrogen from Morocco to this port, this important port. For Madam, for the embassy Netherlands in Morocco, we are very happy to have the discussion about these projects and develop these projects as soon as it's possible.
Thank you very much. It's good to hear that from both sides the ties are very good. We have a long-lasting over 400-year relationship, of course, and it's very good to hear from both sides that the preparedness to cooperate is very high. I see we have a remark from Hans de Willigen, Business Development Manager, New Energies at Royal Vopak.
Thank you very much all for this commitment, and without any doubt, obviously Vopak is working very closely and eagerly together with Moroccan counterparts on the huge potential that Morocco is posing now and going forward. So also very nice to meet you, Mr. Ghazali, and your teams.
Now a question or a remark from Professor Said Hamdiwi, professor at the Tech University of Delft.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Mr. Ghazali, again. So we know each other, but now we are meeting online. So actually I don't have a question, but more a statement. Being a Dutch Moroccan citizen, so I'm living and working in the Netherlands, but I grew up in Morocco. I would like to make just a statement, just to stress the fact that in terms of globalization, I think collaboration is a crucial and critical mean to use if we're going to strengthen our economical position. And therefore also sharing the knowledge, sharing, as we say in Dutch, sharing is multiplying. It's very important. So I really appreciate like these kind of initiatives where it starts brainstorming, discussing the opportunities. Today was it mainly about green energy and hydrogen in particular. And I think all of you know how heavy is Morocco investing when it comes to green energy. So it would be very nice to see this kind of opportunities explored also to other domains, not necessarily green energy. And I'm quite sure, given the pragmatic approach of the Dutch people, and given I'm quite sure that Morocco will, welcome you with open arms to explore the opportunities. So there is a huge opportunities, and I think maybe you are just in an early stage of exploring all the potential and all the opportunities, not only in energy, but there's also mining. There are different sectors in which both parties can really benefit. And as you know, the King of Morocco is pushing very hard, to develop new strategies beyond the standard in order to ensure a speed up of the development of the country, and therefore create material win-win situations with partners from the north part of the Mediterranean. Thank you.
Now I would like to give word to Mr. Noé van Hulst. We've known each other from the time he worked as a special hydrogen envoy at the Ministry of Economics and Climate. He now is chair-elect at the IPHE, International Hydrogen Advisor at GasUnie, Dutch for Gas Union, and Hydrogen Advisor at International Energy Agency. Welcome. For you the word.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
So Mr. van Hulst asked me to put on the presentation. So I'll put it on right now.
Thank you very much for doing that. I hope everybody can hear me, and I hope everybody can see the slides. Maybe you can make them. Okay. Okay, great. The next slide, please. So I want to take you a little bit around the world on what's happening on hydrogen, so that we can put a little bit into context everything that we have already heard about the exciting developments in hydrogen. So we've heard about indeed all of these countries that have launched strategies. Mr. Diederik Samson already said a little bit about that, but of course that's not only in Europe, but that's in fact globally. We're talking also about Japan, about Korea, about Australia, where a lot of development that have launched strategies. Mr. Diederik Samson already said a little bit about that, but of course that's not only in Europe, but that's in fact globally. We're talking also about Japan, about Korea, about Australia, where a lot of development. That's something that I think we need to look. If you look at the whole globe, and this is a slide from McKinsey, you see that there are a tremendous number of countries with very good resources for wind and solar. And potentially you need to think in longer term that all of these resources can of course be developed for the countries themselves, but it also provides a tremendous potential for basically for exporting potentially green hydrogen to the demand centers in the world. Next slide, please. And these are, just some of the cost estimates that were made by McKinsey based on real company data that of companies on hydrogen that they are working with, of what the potential cost could be of hydrogen shipping around the world, from Chile, from Saudi Arabia, from Australia to demand centers elsewhere in the world. Unfortunately, I don't have numbers yet for Morocco, but I'm sure that McKinsey will surely be working on that soon as well. And you can see that it's really, some people say, oh, it's not impossible, it's going to be way too costly. Well, actually, the McKinsey numbers already now, even before we have mastered the technology, are actually much more optimistic about that. Next slide, please. So take Australia as an example. I know that's not that's a different part of the world, but it just gives you an idea of how significant the development of hydrogen is going to be around the world. So this is a quote from the chief scientist, Alan Finkel, from Australia, who was actually the man behind their strategy in Australia that was launched only earlier this year. And he said clearly, clean hydrogen may become a bigger export industry for Australia than LNG. Now, for those of you in this webinar who know a little bit the LNG market, Australia is currently the largest exporter of LNG in the world. So they're working very strongly, and actually Alan Finkel is leading a task force to get the cost of hydrogen below $2 Australian per kilo. Next slide, please. Take you to another part of the world, Chile. Chile, and the minister also has launched a very impressive hydrogen strategy there. So their calculation is that their renewables potential in Chile is 70 times what they can absorb domestically, which means, again, maybe not the largest country in the world, but they have a huge potential. They are already themselves very well advanced in renewables, but also to export to the rest of the world. Next slide, please. So you're seeing many countries developing these hydrogen strategies around the world. So not only in Europe, please keep in mind it is a global market that is developing. And I think that the boss of IEA, Fatih Birol, has made a very interesting comparison of saying, okay, so we're all seeing hydrogen and electrolyzers, but it's at the beginning, basically, of the scale-up that we need. And he makes the comparison that electrolyzers now are where solar and wind were 10 years ago. Meaning 10 years ago, nobody anticipated that solar and wind would be already so dominant as they are today. And the same might very well happen to electrolyzers if we put, of course, the strategies in place and if we develop the right appropriate policies. The next slide, please. So this is just to give you an impression of the many, and this is an analysis of all the hydrogen strategies around the world, was done by the World Energy Council, very interesting. And you see, it's also something to keep in mind, that it's not only a story of, like in Europe very much, of reducing CO2 emissions, it is also, as Diederik Samson already mentioned, also developing new economy, fostering economic growth. And the same you see with those countries who think that they may become a major exporter, and I think obviously Morocco is also one of them, that is also a national development strategy. So it is many things at the same time. The next slide, please. So what are the targets of you if you analyze all these strategies like the World Energy Council has done? You see a very strong emphasis on industry, so using hydrogen to help decarbonize industry, but also, of course, transportation. So the sectors that are very hard to tackle otherwise and to decarbonize otherwise. And within transport, there is a very heavy emphasis on heavy-duty transportation, so trucks, ships, but also even planes, as you've seen from Airbus, who is experimenting now with hydrogen in planes, and a bit less so in buildings, but of course also some of the countries that are hoping to build an export industry. Next slide, please. We're talking about very much a focus on green hydrogen, but also blue hydrogen in the transition phase is given place in many strategies of the country. So meaning like SMR with carbon capture and storage, like also in the Netherlands, UK, the US, other countries are looking at that. Next slide, please. So there have been, again, a lot of strategies, and please keep in mind that the story is not yet finished. Even more are coming. We know China, Russia, and also we know, of course, Morocco is working on this, and many other countries around the world as well. Next slide, please. This you have to click on a couple of times. This is the IEA. Please continue. The IEA just released new reports, and it shows that new reports on what is needed to get to net zero emissions in 2050 for the world as a whole. Now, if you look at the world as a whole and you see also what is already needed in order to have a chance to achieve net zero emissions, for hydrogen, a very important role as part of the energy mix globally to reach net zero emissions in 2050. But if we want to have a chance to achieve that, already in the next 10 years, we will need to ramp up tremendously. So you see here the numbers of for 2030 that we need already to achieve 30 from what is less than 1 megaton of hydrogen production now to 40 in 10 years' time. Next slide, please. You can continue, yeah. So this is what you can see here, and if you click a couple of times, these are busy slides, but this is what you see here in the just released report from the IEA, that you can see that in their sustainable development scenario, the hydrogen demand needs to grow 7-fold compared to what it is now, and it has to penetrate in other sectors as well. The next slide, please. So there's a huge challenge there for all of us to ramp up their production. Now, the good news is, please click on the slide again, that the EU strategy is actually amazingly or surprisingly or not surprisingly, because of course the Commission also talks a lot with the IEA, it is very much in line with the sustainable development scenario that the IEA has developed. So the EU strategy, if we achieve that, is going to be helpful and is going to be exactly on target to get to net zero emissions in 2050. And you see here also all of the announcements that have been made. Next slide, please. Yes, can you go? Yes. So, but the only caveat that I would say is yes, the EU, if you look at it globally, certainly on low carbon hydrogen, is leading the way. There's a big but though. Of course, it assumes that we really achieve these targets. And I'm very encouraged by what Diederik Samson has said earlier today on how strongly committed they are, but it is really up to executing this strategy. We really have to make it happen. Next slide, please. And you can see here that compared to the rest of the world, and this is actually taken from an Asian webinar, you can see that Europe is really leading the way in terms of the projects that are in the pipeline. Next slide, please. You see here again McKinsey numbers of how the expectations of what is being realized are indeed evolving through time. Next slide, please. And you see also here all the commitments that have been made. The European Union, Germany, of course, the Netherlands commitment on how to ramp up green hydrogen production, and also the funding that we are seeing from many countries around the world. Next slide, please. So the good news here for the Netherlands, if we talk about the Netherlands, is the target actually of 4 gigawatt is really high. It is 10% of the European target of 40 gigawatt that we heard about from Diederik Samson. So we're punching above our weight. But again, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We need to also make it happen in reality. Next slide, please. So these are my conclusions. If you look at it from a global perspective, the European is ahead in what particularly people in Asia call the new space race. It's a new space race. But the supply is the feeling of many people is going to be the constraint. So the potential demand is very clear in industry, in heavy-duty transportation. But can we ramp up the supply fast enough to achieve all of these targets? Rapid implementation of the strategy is really key. Therefore, we really need strong public-private partnerships that are, of course, in development. The Netherlands in itself is uniquely positioned to become a front runner in this new hydrogen economy in Europe. And of course, as we said before, big public funding is available in the green recovery packages. So that is the good news. But now we really need implementation to make it happen. And again, to come back to the subject of this webinar, I think also Morocco can play a leading role in North Africa to become this key player for Europe. You can see that Europe has huge ambitions, but they will need a lot of hydrogen, and they will not be able to produce it themselves. So they will need a lot of imports as well. Thank you very much, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much.
Using renewables for their domestic energy mix, but also indeed already talking to countries like Germany, but also the Netherlands, about how to indeed go beyond that and build up this export industry. They are well connected to Europe. So I think that, again, I think they can play a major role. And I think that we all need to be working together to make this happen, including, you know, the financial institutions that I have not mentioned, but we need to focus our banks, the European Investment Bank, and all of the European funding that is there for connecting Europe with North Africa. We all need to mobilize this, I think, to make it happen. So I think the potential is really there, and it would be a shame and a pity if you know, for some reason we are not able to do that, and then, you know, the hydrogen will be imported in larger quantities from even countries and continents further away, when we are not using relative, you know, big potential of regions that are so close to us. And I think there's also many arguments in favor of that.
Okay, dankjewel.
Thank you. Luc Schillings, you put on your microphone. Please share with us your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very clear presentation. What I noticed in a debate in the Netherlands on hydrogen is that in some way or another, there's the feeling that all the hydrogen we need should be domestically produced, and that's very, very strange. We hear in these presentations, we hear that this is not really possible, and that we will need to import them. But we also saw that there is quite a lot that will be produced in Europe, hopefully. What I'm curious about is what part of the needs do we need to import of a country as Morocco? Is that I don't know, 20%, or what is what will we be able to produce ourselves in Europe, and what will we need to import? Thank you very much.
Yeah, great question. Thank you very much. It's of course very hard to sort of to project and to predict, because it all depends really on, you know, are we successful in ramping up also the and in mobilizing concretely this demand for clean hydrogen. So I mean, people that say, you know, we should be all producing it domestically, I mean, they could be right, but they can only be right if it stays very small. If it stays very small, yes, we can produce it locally. But if we are successful, if really industry will start using clean hydrogen, both blue and green, and heavy duty transportation, the volumes are so big that we will never be able to produce it alone. I mean, I think I saw a number, and I'm quoting it from the top of my head. We have like one big, take our biggest steel company in the Netherlands, Tata Steel. If they would completely decarbonize their steel production with green hydrogen, you would probably need more than half, probably I think it's up to 60 or 70% of our total green production, green electricity production, just for that one plant. So, and Germany is fully aware of that. So Germany is thinking, if you look at Germany and everybody is focusing on the plans that they have on the 5 gigawatt and whatever that they're trying to produce, they will trying to produce domestically, but the needs that they have to decarbonize, to help decarbonize German industry are much larger. So they are thinking about the majority of their green hydrogen demand will have to be satisfied by imports. They're talking, you know, maybe 70, 80%. And take a completely different view. If you look at Europe now, Europe is importing roughly half of their energy, or more than half of their total energy demand is being imported. Of course, that's mainly fossil. That fossil will have to be replaced somehow by decarbonized inputs, mainly also hydrogen. Well, it's very logical to think that it's not going to be very different. So yes, it's going to be, you know, probably 50% imports or maybe 40% import. It doesn't matter, but huge quantities of imports. And we're not going to suddenly move from a system where we import as Europe half of our energy and then suddenly we can produce everything domestically. It's not going to happen. And for the simple reasons of, I think, that have dominated energy you know, over the many decades. So I think that one way or another, we're going to see significant imports of green hydrogen. And again, I think Morocco is well placed to be part of that story.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Mr. Ghazali, please put on your microphone and share with us your thoughts.
Yes. I would firstly I want to thank Mr. Noah van Harst for his intervention, clear and very important data in this intervention. And I want to say that there is 2 points. First one, Morocco is not only the big potential to produce hydrogen. Morocco is ecosystem. And when you are at 14 kilometers from Morocco, and you products in Morocco, and you get it from hydrogen from Morocco, it's not importation. It's a collaboration, it's cooperation, it's it's a huge build together for products from hydrogen. And in 1997, one of European responsibles said that Morocco is producing in Morocco is a solution for competitivity of Europe and stability for the industry of Europe. It's the same now with hydrogen technology. We have ecosystems. We have a good relationship between Morocco and Europe. We can products as low cost in Morocco, so we can build this alliance to have technology for hydrogen between Morocco and Europe. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you
agree.
very much.
Certainly.
Great. Mr. Hans de Willige of FOPAC. Please
Yeah,
share.
thank you in a way for these excellent insights. I think maybe to add one of our analysis that we have done is that if you look at the projected installed wind energy on the North Sea and North Sea countries surrounding the North Sea, then if you would apply all the wind energy into green hydrogen, then you would probably only cover half of the demand increase going forward. So that probably also emphasizes the strong necessity to import hydrogen from renewable energy rich countries. So just as an additional insight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with imports. It's a strange perception that, you know, as if we don't. I mean, our whole economy is imports and exports, and there is nothing wrong with imports.
No, as FOPAC, we think there's nothing wrong with imports. That's correct. or exports, also fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great. Any further questions, or we go to our last, but certainly not least speaker of today, Professor Ad van Wijk. Yes, can we conclude?
Yep.
Noé van Hulst, very many thanks for your thoughts. It was very elaborate and very insightful. So it really helped us getting a right picture of the hydrogen economy from a larger scale and also from a global scale. That's very good. Thank you very much. Please stay tuned with us till the end.
I will. Sure. Thank you.
Professor Ad van Wijk, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Marcus.
Oh, great. Can you share a PowerPoint presentation with us?
Yes, if you allow me.
Yeah, you're allowed. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much also for the invitation, Mr. Alloos. Yes, what I want to tell you in this final presentation is a little bit why we get this green hydrogen economy and why Morocco especially has such a huge potential. And of course, I must be humble. I'm a Dutch person, so I'm not aware of all the aspects of Morocco, but I see Morocco as one of the leading companies in the North African renewable energy, but also hydrogen production. And I will show you some of these examples also in this presentation. But let me first go to my first slide, and also that was pointed out by the first speaker, Nico van Doorn, and also by Noé van Hulst. We certainly don't have in Europe such a good renewable energy resources. If you look to this map, we have in the north of Europe quite good wind resources, especially at sea, the North Sea, the Baltic Sea. And in the south, of course, in Portugal, Spain, Greece, Italy, we have good solar resources. But if you look to this map, in North Africa, in the Middle East, the solar resources are even better. And at some places, also in Morocco, but for example, also in Egypt or Algeria, we have also very good wind resources. And sometimes these wind resources in desert areas, for example in Egypt, at the Red Sea, the wind speeds are higher than at places at the North Sea. So they have very good solar resources and they have very good wind resources. And when you look to this, also the size, the area that we have in the European Union is of course, when you compare that with the Sahara Desert, the size of the European Union is only half of it. So there is more place, more space, you could say, in these areas. They have better resources. And then there is another difference, of course. European Union is, there live much more people than in these areas in North Africa. So when you look to the specific conditions for Europe to produce renewable energy, renewable electricity by solar and wind, especially, then you see we have, of course, some potential we have to develop, but also we have to see that we collaborate with our neighboring countries, as Diederik Samson has already pointed out, to get this done for our economy and also for realizing a clean energy system in general. And therefore also the European Union has said it right, it is for hydrogen till 2030, 2 times 40 gigawatt. It's not only in Europe, but you have to produce also outside the countries. And here you see that solar at this moment is nearing more or less the €1 per kilowatt hour. The last bid in Portugal was 1.12 cents per kilowatt hour, euro cents. And you see also Abu Dhabi, 1.35 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour. So we are close to reaching 1 cent per kilowatt hour. And that's of course the interesting thing. When we look to solar electricity cost in, for example, Germany or the Netherlands, building solar farms, we are at 7, 8, 9, 10 cents per kilowatt hour. When we build our offshore wind farms, we are at the moment at maybe 4 or 5 cents per kilowatt hour, but not in the region of these very low cost of solar that we see in the good resources areas. Now, how could you, and I think that is one of the main aspects, how could you transport that very low cost solar electricity to other places far away from where you produce it? And then you see the conversion step to hydrogen is interesting, because then you have lower transport cost in general. When you compare pipelines with cables, it is a factor of 10, but especially you can also mitigate the flexibility in production. You can deliver at the right time, at the right place that hydrogen, because you can store it in large quantities. And here you see an electrolyzer. And an electrolyzer has a similar technology, say characteristics as solar cells. It is also cells. All these slices that you see in these areas are cells. When you need more, you stack the cells. That is what you do with solar cells also. Then you have a module, and here you call it a stack. And when you need more, then you place more stacks next to each other. Scaling up production, the volume of production will bring down the cost considerably. But you have to realize that it is not only about the capex cost, especially the electricity cost, they determine the hydrogen cost. So lower electricity costs will have an effect of 60 to 80% in the hydrogen cost. That is shown here by the IEA. You see on the right a graph where we have a variation in the electricity cost, and on the left you have a variation in the capex cost, the investment cost. And it's clearly shown that the electricity costs have a much higher, larger effect than, of course, the capex cost. Although we have to reduce the capex cost also in this presentation. Now, how could you, if you have hydrogen, how could you transport it? Now, You can transport it by ship over large distances in many ways, but here I show you 3 of them. You can make it liquid, that is minus 253 degrees below zero. We do this technology already for decades because we sent our rockets to space with liquid hydrogen, but the first liquid hydrogen ship, the Carrier, has been built and launched in Japan last year, December. Now, you can do it also in a different way. You can convert to ammonia, NH3, by taking nitrogen from the air. And ammonia, of course, is a very well-known product because it is the main component of a fertilizer. Also in Morocco, you see a lot of ammonia import and export as a fertilizer over there. But you can also bind it to another element, and then it is a liquid organic hydrogen carrier, and you can reuse your ships that you have today that transport oil. So every of these things has their advantages when you look to the transport of hydrogen by ship. And that is, of course, what we see today. There are in Japan, Australia, liquid hydrogen carriers. They are also from Brunei to Japan. You see the development of liquid organic hydrogen carriers to transport the hydrogen. And also in Europe, and this is an example of a collaboration between also Portugal and the Netherlands, where we have signed a memorandum of understanding to import from Portugal to the Netherlands hydrogen, not only as hydrogen, but in all these forms that I've showed you. But there is another way to transport hydrogen, and that is by reusing your gas grid. Europe has a very dense transport grid for natural gas, and as you can see also on the right, there is also already a large gas grid from North Africa to Europe, especially Algeria is producing a lot of gas, and they transport it by pipelines to Italy and Spain, and one of these pipelines is of course also crossing Morocco, going to Spain. Capacity in these pipelines is already more than 60 gigawatts, 60,000 megawatts. So there is quite a substantial capacity in these pipelines. And when you compare that, for example, with electricity, Morocco has 2 connections with Spain, electricity cables. They each have a capacity of only 0.7 gigawatts, 700 megawatts. So there is much more capacity available in pipelines, and that is in general. Every country, you can also see here the gas grid. There is a lot of capacity transporting the gas from the gas fields all the way to Europe, also cross-border. There is a lot of capacity. And that's also what you have seen today. The Netherlands has already, Nico van Doorn has already showed you or told you that we will convert one of these big transport pipelines of gas to hydrogen. Germany has the same plans, and recently also 11 gas TSOs have launched this conversion plan for pipelines, natural gas pipelines to hydrogen, with a capacity of say between 5 and 15 gigawatts. And when you see the transport cost, it's only 1/3 of a cent per kilowatt hour hydrogen per 1,000 kilometers. Reusing part of the gas network, but also building some of the new aspects. These gas TSOs own the gas grids on land in the countries, but not the interconnections. They are now owned by a consortium of companies, including also private owned companies, and therefore you don't see a lot of these interconnections, but you can connect to Morocco quite easy with a pipeline. And that's also what we have published. It's not only about the pipelines in Europe that you have to, but you have to bring it also, these pipelines and these connections to, for example, Africa. And we have made some calculations. If you have built very big pipelines, Nord Stream type of pipelines, over a distance of 2,500 kilometers, the transport costs are about a half cent per kilowatt hour. When you compare this with electricity, it would be 10 times much. So that would be 5 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, there is another issue, and that's of course storage. Today we store already a lot of natural gas, especially in empty gas fields, but also in salt caverns. But we can store also hydrogen in salt caverns. Also not a new technology. For example, in the United Kingdom, they have a salt cavern already since 1972, which is storing hydrogen in these salt caverns. We store a lot of gas, almost 20% of the gas that is first produced. A stable production is first stored before it is consumed. And you see here a map of all these salt formations, and we need much more capacity for storage when we do this with renewable energy. But you can make dedicated salt caverns in these salt formations. And then storage costs are more or less a factor of 100 or even more cheaper than when you store that in batteries today. But also when you store it in pumped hydro, that's much more expensive than storing energy as hydrogen into salt caverns. Now, let's have a look to the possibilities of Morocco. When you look to Morocco, of course, they have a very good solar irradiation. This is a solar irradiation map for Morocco, and you see it is dark red or red. They have even the highest irradiation at some places in the world, you could say. But you need, for example, when you produce the hydrogen from solar, then it is of course also intermittent production of hydrogen, and like it is with electricity. But also Morocco has interesting capabilities to store that hydrogen into dedicated developed salt caverns. Here you see on the left, you see the salt formations that is at sea, but also going onshore, and also in the north it is going onshore. And especially in this area, it's difficult to pronounce for me, as Ouara area, you see that you have high irradiations for solar and the possibility to create salt caverns for hydrogen storage. And now that when we go one step further, this is one of the very interesting locations in Morocco, the port of Yorf Lasfar, where they have a steel plant, but they have a phosphate mine. They import a lot of ammonia and they mix it with phosphate, and they export a lot of fertilizers. This is really one of these issues where the areas where you can produce not only green hydrogen, but also convert it to ammonia, make fertilizers out of it, make also using the hydrogen also to produce green steel, and be an exporter by ship to many other areas in the world. This, and Morocco has seen this also. This is also IRSN and Mazen who are working on these projects. But this can be one of the things that we have to cooperate together also with, for example, the Port of Rotterdam, on these sites where you see the possibilities to create very cheap renewable hydrogen, but also the products that you can make with renewable hydrogen. But let's take it one step further. If you look to the good sites, and if you look how close Morocco is to Spain and Portugal, for instance, then at these good sites you can produce with a good solar irradiation. Now, I would say in a couple of years for 1 cent per kilowatt hour electricity by solar. If you have this very cheap solar, you can produce for say about €1 per kilo or lower hydrogen over there. And let's have a look. If you have a 100 gigawatt solar plant, because we have to think much larger and at a much larger scale than at this moment we think about the electricity system, because the electricity is, of course, only 10-20% of the total energy demand that we have in the world. At the same location there, we can store this in salt caverns, and then you can produce base load hydrogen from these sites. And then you can have a pipeline connection from this site that is going through the port of Jorg-Las-Vaar to Spain or Portugal, for example. A distance of 750 kilometers, capacity 20 gigawatt. Then you have a full load hours of 8,000 hours in this pipeline. Then you transport about 4 million tons of hydrogen that you have produced with this 100 gigawatt of solar hydrogen production plant. And the transport costs are only a quarter of a cent per kilowatt hour. So in total, or 0.1, in total you can transport it by pipeline into Europe for about €1, maybe 1.1 euro per kilo. And that is not in 2050. This is possible more or less in the next decade to come. Of course, one of these things that we have to do together with Europe and Morocco is building this infrastructure, which is not only shipping infrastructure, but also pipeline infrastructure, storage capacity available, etc., etc. And I think there is a bright future to work together between the Netherlands and Morocco, because when you look, for example, in my university, we have very much knowledge about salt cavern storage, about pipelines, about electrolyzer, about everything. But also in Morocco, we are working together with IRSN, for example, to see if we can have these close cooperations to build really this bright future of renewable hydrogen together. And as I showed you, hopefully, Morocco has really an interesting potential to do this, both from a geological potential, but also for the irradiation, but also there is already the industry that can help to build this further. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Ad van Wijk. This is very interesting and very nice to see that at the end of the more broad pictures that you have now more you gave more insight in the economies of scale, and also the figures about investments and the power and the cost per kilowatt hour. So that's very nice to see that it all comes together. It's great. We have a great opportunity. We are a little behind schedule right now. I hope it still fits in your agendas. Any questions at this moment? It was very thorough what you shared with us, but it can always be some question. No, was it that clear? Yeah, it was very clear, Ad van Wijk. Very clear what you shared with us. Okay, is there no way question?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. Oh, who is this? Mr. Ghazali.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, yes. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ad van, for your intervention. It's very important for me and pertinent to the database that you exposed. So if it's possible, I haven't a question, but if it's possible to have a contact with you after this meeting, it will be very important for me to discuss about the potential that you exposed.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. You can have all my phone and my emails in the organizer if you want, and I will ask them to give me your
yes.
mail and phone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We will share the contact data if required. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Any more questions? No, not at this moment. Okay. Well, of course, we can contact one another after this meeting. The hope and Development Foundation and I would like to help you with that if required. A lot of you people already know one another. Yeah, that comes to the concluding notes from my side. I will give the word to Amar Arwi in a moment. Of course, a lot of people might ask why we organized this. This was an initiative from the Hope and Development Foundation and Geodesk. And we thought it would be very interesting to share views on economic cooperation. Basically, also the reason or the raison d'etre, so we say, for the European Union. Just after the Second World War, we decided to cooperate on coals and steel to further peace and integration in Europe. So what you can see history shows is that if you work economically together, and energy is a very good source to work together on economy, well, it just binds peoples and countries together, and it gives great opportunity to get to know one another and to cooperate. That's also the reason why we are very happy that University of Applied Sciences is on board. We also see an opportunity for internships and exchanges for students as soon as the corona troubles are over, that students can be exchanged, so you can share knowledge with one another. That would be a very nice opportunity as well. Furthermore, the Hope and Development Foundation would very much like to organize an event, a physical event, if the corona troubles are over and allow us to do so in the Netherlands, and we would very much welcome our partners and friends from Morocco, and we would be very happy to visit Morocco once that will be possible regarding the virus right now. Yeah, there are some housekeeping matters. We have recorded this, not broadcasted this, but we would like to share a video if no one opposes to that, so we can share the information. We could share also with you the presentations if the speakers allow us to do that. If anyone has any objections, please let it know, then we won't do that. So we can share this. If you would love to have this anonymously without any names in the video online to share it with the broader public, that could also be an option. Please let us know if okay. And you can also email us about that, so we can share knowledge and you can look back at the video and review what has been said. That really brings us to the end of this morning. We're now in the afternoon already in Amsterdam time. I would like to give a word to Amar Harwi.
Geachte hier namens Stichting Hoop en Ontwikkeling, wij danken alle sprekers, alle deelnemers bij deze belangrijke bijeenkomst en belangrijk thema. Wij waren eigenlijk van plan deze bijeenkomst fysiek te organiseren, maar gezien corona is op die manier georganiseerd. Wij hopen echt in de toekomst zoiets te organiseren, echt fysiek, dat deelnemers elkaar spreken en van dichtbij. Dus wij gaan gewoon na corona iets organiseren. En we hopen ook een reis kunnen organiseren naar Marokko. Misschien is dat ook belangrijk om van dichtbij te zien hoe dat gaat daar. Wij danken ook de excellentie-ambassadeur van Nederland in Rabat voor zijn deelnemen. We horen dat hij pas begonnen en toch heeft deelgenomen. كنشكروا السي الغزالي جزيل الشكر على هذا الندوه وعلى هذه المشاركه القيمه اللي غادي تخلي المغرب يعني تحطوه في الصوره اللي يستاهلها بالخصوص الطاقه. فكنشكرك جزيل الشكر، كنشكروا معالي الوزير السي رباح على الجهد ديالو، وكذلك كنشكروا السي بدر إيكن اللي كان غادي يشارك معنا ولكن لظروف معينه اجل، وكيتمنى حتى هو ان شاء الله في المستقبل تكون لهم مشاركه فعاله. كنشكروا الجميع ونتمنى ان شاء الله غادي ننظموا واحد اللقاء في المستقبل يكون هنا في هولندا او في المغرب. هذا هو الكلام اللي قلت لهم هنايا باش الامور ان شاء الله تكون يعني على ما يرام ان شاء الله. كنشكرك السي محمد الغزالي جزيل الشكر.
عفوا سي عمر.
بيدايزي.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I see some raised hands. Is there anyone who would like to say something? Yes, Luc Schillings.
Yes, thank you very much. Only to thank you all very much for this conference, and for you especially, DeoDrive and the Stichting Hoop en Ontwikkeling. I think this was an excellent initiative to take, and really saw sharing of minds, and we hope that it will be continued, and we are of course very open or supporting also your efforts in this field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luc. That's very nice to hear from you. Thank you very much. Anyone else? I see Shukran Khatir. Yeah, is that something with a question? No?
Ghazali.
Mr. Ghazali, you still have a remark for us? No. Anyone put on your microphone if you want to say something?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you, Mr. Ghazali.
Okay, thank you. I'm very happy in the end of this discussions. I saw that many operators and private industry have done the studies about hydrogen in Morocco, and it's very great for us because they interest to have projects in Morocco, and it's a very tangible evidence. So we will be very interested to meet them, to facilitate their installation in Morocco in order to build their projects. We are convinced that hydrogen for Morocco is too profitable for Morocco and Europe. Our competitivity and competitivity of Europe industries will be great with hydrogen in Morocco. So we are open to participate, to contribute, and to facilitate all the projects in this area. Thank you for your efforts.
Mr. Ghazali, thank you very much for your concluding notes, and thank you very much for being with us and sharing your thoughts. If there's anything we can do to further negotiations or contacts with people you need, Amar and I are more willing than to help you with that. Also in accordance with the embassy in Rabat, of course. So if there is not any questions or statements anymore, then I would like to thank you very much for all your attention and your time. And hopefully we can meet again, either online or physically, and we can proceed as discussed. Thank you very much. I wish you all a very nice Friday and a very nice weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye. Thank you.
you.